Niall O'Loughlin is from caricatures.ie and is an artist as well. Niall, thanks for joining us here on Lunchtime Live this afternoon. What do you make of this conversation?
Hi, Andrea.
How are you?
I'm good. I was listening attentively there. There's so much you could say. I suppose just to start with, this particular cartoon, what people are missing is it fitted the narrative of the piece, but people are talking about the cartoon. But if you read the piece, it opens with the witch hunt on Leo Varadkar. So as a cartoonist, that particular image fits the narrative of it. But on a wider scale, we're talking about Mary Lou. She's the leader of Sinn Féin. Like, she is the leader of Sinn Féin. I can guarantee you that would be water off a duck's back to her. It wouldn't bother her. I don't think it was implying that Mary Lou was a witch. Like, it really was. If you read the piece, as I said, it fitted the narrative of it. But on a wider scale, it's just an example of just this has been coming for years. I worked in newspapers. I did editorial stuff. And editors now are just terrified of litigation. You can't, I think Terry summed it up there when she was talking. It's so difficult to say anything anymore or to do anything. Everything is becoming sanitized, from cartoons to news presenters such as yourself. Even if on your own station, some of the stuff you read, if anybody has an opinion that's outside the norm. And this is just another example of the sanitization of literally everything. This, as I said, this particular cartoon, I don't think it would bother Mary Lou in the slightest. And I think it's brilliant, the fact that she's the leader. I emphasize, the leader of the party. And I'm talking to you. This is knocking women. If it was a personal attack on as Terry said, on the way she looked or something, or I could completely understand that, but it wasn't.
Do you know what? Actually, Niall, stay with us, because I just want to play a short piece of the Emma de Souza, from the spokesperson for the National Women's Council of Ireland. She was actually speaking about this to Shane on a News Talk Breakfast earlier this morning. Just take a listen.
Satire cannot be used as a cover for misogyny. This is a time-honoured tool used for smearing women. The connection between women as witches is well understood, and unfortunately is still being used within politics, this derogatory depiction of women as witches or a villain to be cast out. If we look at the historical context, we see even Hillary Clinton was described as a witch from the days when she was First Lady. Julia Gillard, the first female Prime Minister of Australia, was met of chance with Ditch the Witch. And a video that went viral of Theresa May with her, quote, witch's cackle is another example. Yeah. It's misogyny.
Right, Emma de Souza there, as I said, Niall, from the National Women's Council. I heard the interview in its entirety this morning, and she talked about, the fact it was derogatory, and the depiction of women was unfair and unacceptable and sexist as well. When you sit down to draw, caricatures like this, do you take into account the potential backlash, or, I suppose, an awareness of people's feelings, or does that come into it? Or
look, it has more and more. Like, literally now, before you post anything, you have to ask yourself the question: am I going to get a backlash over this? I don't, as I said, work for a newspaper anymore. I put up my own stuff if I've got something political, and often I'll have to take it down, even though I've asked myself the question time and time again. Is this safe? Is this okay? Of course you do. You will literally get attacked for everything now. In case I forget to say this, like Spitting Image, which is a UK program you might remember from years ago. I know they relaunched it recently, and it was it didn't do quite as well for some reason. I think it was on a weird station. But men are lampooned. Every politician since time began have been, fair game for satire. Every single paper, everything, men are constantly, Varadkar, all of them, they all get it in the neck. It's part of the job. And again, I go back to Mary Lou as a witch. It fitted the narrative. Again, I don't think it was a personal attack of her. Yes, it was, kind of, you could call it a lazy kind of depiction or whatever. But men have been getting it. Satire it's been sanitized.
Yeah,
it really is.
I'm looking at some of the messages.
But yeah, you do have to ask yourself. You do. I did for example, I did a cartoon, and every time I put it up, it actually went viral. It was one of Gemma Doherty and John Waters getting a kick in the backside from the guards, and I was accused of violence against women because And that's like never in a million years would I have thought like I'd be accused of encouraging violence against women, and that's what you're up against.
Yeah, I know. And look, I mean, the thing is as well, I mean, just some of the messages there, for instance, no comparison to what about the male figures. Other politicians had some horrendous stuff printed and photographs taken of them, and other listeners got in touch to say, like, why are you only talking about women in this conversation? What about all the photographs and cartoons, caricatures as well of the male politicians? I suppose, look, just before I take a quick break, we're going to stay with this because there's a huge reaction from listeners actually to this today here in 53106. But the point that Lorna Bogue made a few moments ago, and I know a lot of people are making this very same point on Twitter, is that while for Mary Lou McDonald it might be, this mightn't cost her a thought today, but for other people maybe considering a career in politics, or for younger women looking at getting into politics, that this isn't the right image we should be sending out to people. I mean, what do you say to that argument?
Again, it goes back. I think you mentioned it earlier. If you're in the public eye, you're potentially fair game. And there is a line, and I do totally agree that women are judged more than men. I mean, this whole thing of like commenting on what a woman wears and stuff. I mean, I don't agree with any of that. That's like you don't do that with men. There is still that level of misogyny or whatever that does exist. Of course, it does. But I mean, don't destroy satire. Men get it every bit as bad, if not worse. And do you know what? It's a compliment to Mary Lou, and it's a compliment to women of how far she's come. To see a woman in the newspaper, to see her being represented, as Terry said, it's all men, and I think it's fantastic that that she's risen so high and she's doing so well that she's almost, as you said, once you put yourself out there, you become. But it's satire.
Yeah,
this really, in this
well, I'm interested in our listeners' views on that particular point.